समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
I don't know if you saw the letter that MK Stalin, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, tweeted to the whole country. It was addressed to their sisters and brothers, meaning all of India. And it said, do you know how many languages Hindi has swallowed up? He went on to argue, as many people have before, that the idea of a Hindi heartland is a relatively recent one, that the states that we consider to be Hindi speaking were actually states that had many regional languages, many local languages. And he gave examples: Bhojpuri, Gadwali, Kumaoni. I think he gave examples about 20 languages. He said Hindi had swallowed up all of these languages, which were, quote unquote, gasping for survival. He said, we in the South see this, and that's why we're resisting it. Now, if you've been following the controversy, you'll know why the Chief Minister took the unusual step of issuing this tweet. There's been a big controversy in Tamil Nadu about what they see as the imposition of Hindi. There is, as you will see, a long history to this and a long background to this business of Hindi in Tamil Nadu. But there is, I think, a genuine feeling now that the BJP government in the center is trying to do it again. Already, important members of the local BJP have protested. Some have already left. And an issue of Tamil pride is now, I think, on the table. But even as Stalin was tweeting this, Amit Shah was in Tamil Nadu, and he was assuring the people of Chennai that they needn't worry. The Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, would make sure that Tamil Nadu would not lose any seats in the proposed delimitation exercise for the Lok Sabha. Now, you probably know what this is, but just for the record, let me explain it. There is a move now to change the way in which the Lok Sabha is organized. The argument is that when they allotted seats to each state in the old days, long ago, the population pattern in India was different. The population pattern has now changed so that a seat in, say, UP might have 3.8 million residents for an MP to cover. In Tamil Nadu, it could be 1.8 million. So the argument is that the old allocation is no longer valid, that perhaps the size of parliament should be increased. And once that's done, states that have bigger constituencies, states that have increased in population, should get more MPs. Now, the fear in Tamil Nadu is that as a consequence, southern states will lose out. Amit Shah addressed this, but he addressed it only partly. He said, you will not lose any seats. Yeah, maybe, but what about the rest? If Tamil Nadu stays at the number of seats it has now, and say Uttar Pradesh and Bihar get more seats, then everything changes. One calculation which says that the number of seats in parliament will increase by 750 something, would give state of UP 128 seats as distinct from the 80 it has at the moment. It'll completely change how parliament is composed, and the so-called Hindi heartland states will have so many seats that you just have to win the Hindi heartland to be able to rule India. The votes of the South will matter less and less. MPs from the South will matter less and less. Now, obviously, this is not an idea the BJP is uncomfortable with. The BJP is essentially, despite inroads in many other southern states and some footholds in Karnataka, a North India party. If you look at the BJP parliamentary party, the majority of its MPs come from North India and mainly from the Hindi-speaking states. So if you were to give more MPs to the Hindi-speaking states while keeping Tamil Nadu, Kerala and co. at roughly the same level, you would change the nature of Indian politics. The concerns of North India would become the concerns of all of India as far as politics was concerned. Parties that were strong in North India, i.e. the BJP, would only have to do reasonably well in North India to get an overall majority and to form a government. So you can see why South Indians are upset about this. They feel they're going to be disenfranchised, and they feel strongly that the imposition of Hindi is one more example of how the North is treating them badly. Now, South Indians have a point, which is, well, let's start with population. The reason the population has gone up so much in those states like UP and Bihar is because they've really failed at population control. In the southern states, they've succeeded in controlling their populations. In fact, overall in India, if you look at the so-called replacement rate, that's the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. We say that India is still increasing in population. Well, it is, but only because of those 4 states. You take them out of the mix, and India's population is well under control. It may actually be going down in a generation or so. This is significant because in the 60s and the 70s, we were obsessed with population growth. We wondered if India's population keeps growing, what will happen? Well, the answer is it hasn't kept growing outside of those 4 states. It's the South, really, and other states that have made the difference. Now, say the South, you're penalizing us for controlling population, and you're giving people who haven't been able to control their population a greater say in politics. That surely is unfair. Besides, say South Indians, look at other markers. Look at literacy, for example. I think the literacy rate in UP is about 66, 68%. In Kerala, it's about 96, 98%. And that's true generally. The so-called Bimaru states, the Hindi heartland states, are much less educated and much less literate than the South Indian states. Look at economic growth. Economic growth in India does not come from those states. It comes from outside. South Indian states grow much faster, have more robust economies. Long before social media was invented, Mohandas Pai, who you probably know from Twitter, did a calculation, and he worked out that if you took the GDP and the rate of growth of South Indian states, you would find that South India was on par with Asian tigers like, say, Singapore. It was growing as fast as them. The reason all of India's figures came down was the Hindi heartland and the fact that there wasn't so much economic progress. So, say South Indians, why is it that when we are taking India forward, when we are leaders in things like software, for instance, we are an advertisement for India abroad, you are about to implement changes that will penalize us, will make us less relevant on the national political scene because the Hindi-speaking states will get so many more MPs. I mean, the answer to that is that we're a democracy and, it's one man, one vote. If more people are in the North, of course, they'll get more MPs. But, say South Indians, yes, we are a democracy, but we're also a federal structure. There should be some way of maintaining parity between the states, giving us a say in what happens. This is not a view without precedent. In the United States, for example, there's often a difference between, say, the popular vote and the person who becomes president. For instance, when Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, she won the popular vote, but he became president because the US has something called the Electoral College, which is designed to make sure that the populous states don't swamp every election. We don't have anything like that in India. And if these delimitation proposals go ahead, then yes, the more populous states, and in many ways, the more backward states, the more unsuccessful states will swamp everything. So the South is upset. Hindi is, of course, a particularly sensitive subject. Many of us don't remember this, or we're too young to remember, but when the Dravidian movement started, there was a strong secessionist element to it. That element found expression in resentment of Hindi. In 1965, when the Shastri government tried to make changes to impose Hindi on schools and the education system in the South, in Madras, as it was then, there was a violent agitation in which, by some estimates, at least 60 people died. They were only able to control this agitation by changing policies. In 1967, Indira Gandhi's government, recognizing that you had to give room to regional aspirations and cultural pride, passed an amendment to the Official Languages Act. And that said, in effect, that for virtually an indefinite period of time, English and Hindi would be on par as national languages, as linked languages. Now, people try and deliberately play this down. If you've been looking at social media, you'll see people claiming that Hindi is India's national language, everyone should speak it. Well, sorry, that's not the constitutional position. It's not the one national language that everyone must speak. And when you try and impose it on the South, where there's already a sense of the North having too great a say in politics and probably having an even greater say after delimitation, you rake up old wounds. And that, unfortunately, is what's happening now. That's why Stalin wrote this letter. His point is accurate in a sense, in that Hindi is not an ancient Indian language in the way that Tamil is. Hindi is a relatively modern construct created out of other Indian languages. And the states that we consider to be Hindi speaking, UP, Himachal, etc., were not really Hindi speaking earlier. It's an amalgamation of other languages that's now been imposed on them. Their own languages are, as Stalin said, gasping for breath. Now, what makes it worse is the kind of Hindi that people seek to impose, the Hindi that nobody ever spoke. They seek to impose a Sanskritized Hindi, which is the creation of babus, of politicians, of pundits, and of Akashvani. It's not a language that belongs to Indian history. So say Tamilians. We have such an old culture. Tamil, according to some views, is at least as old as Sanskrit. Why should that be given a burial? Why should that be subject to all kinds of regulations? And Hindi, which is a relatively recent language created artificially in North India, be imposed on us? I mean, there's no real answer to these questions. You have to have sensitivity. You have to realize that while Hindi is a language that many people in the government speak, it's not really a language that all of India was meant to speak. The irony in all this, of course, is that even though attempts to impose Hindi have failed, Hindi has actually spread all over India. You go, say, to Arunachal Pradesh on the border with China, and you will find many people speaking Hindi. And the reason why Hindi has succeeded and why it has spread is not because of babus or politicians. It's because of popular culture. It's mostly because of Hindi cinema and because of its offshoots, TV, streaming, Hindi film music. People have learned Hindi from those movies and they've begun to speak it. That is how a language spreads. It spreads slowly but firmly, and it spreads through popular culture. It does not spread through diktat or through what politicians demand. So many people say, even in Chennai now, you will get by if you speak Hindi. That wasn't true 30 years ago, say. And that's not because it's been imposed, but because people voluntarily have understood it thanks to popular culture. So people say there's already resentment in the South. Why not leave it there? Why try and make changes to the way languages are taught in school? It's a reasonable argument. And what worries me is that the people who want to impose Hindi are also the same people who run battles against Bollywood. They call it Urduwood. Until about they hate its secular character. They hate the fact that it brings India together. Until about 2 or 3 years ago, as you're aware, there was a huge war against Bollywood, a campaign against Bollywood with a strong political stroke official component. It failed, as we don't have it now. But these people, these so-called Hindi advocates, really have no respect for Bollywood, which is actually the only way of spreading Hindi. There's the other problem, because much of the "you must all speak Hindi" stuff comes from people in the Hindi belt who are not necessarily very proficient in English or are first-generation English speakers. So their insecurity, their inadequacies get translated into resentment. It's resentment against English speakers who are described as the Lachans elite, or as they would call it, the Lutyens elite. And they will talk about how these people really don't understand India, forgetting that the India they're talking about is the India of 4 states. It's not the real India or all of India. It's these same people who call people who speak English colonial slaves, who venerate V.D. Savarkar even when he wrote all his apologies to his colonial masters. He wasn't a slave, he was fine. So there is a strong illogical political component. And the truth is that if you have this delimitation threat hanging over the heads of South India, if you have this campaign to impose Hindi, what you're doing is creating a schism. Already you have a schism between Hindus and Muslims, a schism created mostly by people from the Hindi belt, a schism that goes against everything the people who founded this country wanted. If you create another schism between North and South, the short answer is India won't survive. So trying to impose Hindi, trying to change the composition of parliament to give the North more of a say, it sounds good for one political party and its supporters, but is it good for India? No, of course it isn't.